Move the motion. There's 40 minutes, I understand, in this section.
Okay.
Yep.
I'd like to move the motion on mortgage arrears of the Code of Conduct. And the reason for the motion is very simple. There is a crisis. It may have gone off the radar for the media. It may have gone off the radar for the government, but it hasn't gone away. 95,000 families are struggling to hold on to their homes. These are the numbers of those with mortgage arrears of over 90 days, and this excludes the buy-to-let properties. And I note in the government amendment, you make a point about the reduction of reduction of those people who are in 90 days arrears. You're saying they're being were reduced, the figures, but the long-term arrears figures went up significantly. This category has increased quarter on quarter, every quarter, and now has 37,000 people in it, each with an average arrears of €49,000. So I think the point you're making is just throwing a bit of sand into people's eyes to make them think that the situation has been resolved or is moving along. According to information given to the Finance Committee by the banks in April of this year, legal processes have begun or were being considered by the various banks in over 22,000 cases. This could mean that 20,000 plus people, most with families, could lose their home over the next year to 18 months. That's the reality. I don't know if you heard that point I was making, Minister. This could mean that 20,000 plus people, most with families, could lose their home over the next year to 18 months. When the Code of Conduct was introduced, and the Minister for Finance stated, the Central Bank's Code of Conduct on Mortgage Arrears, CCMA, places an onus on the banks in respect of a cooperating borrower to explore all the options of an alternative repayment arrangement offered by the lender to address a primary dwelling mortgage difficulty before any legal action is considered. That was the quote from the Minister for Finance. And I think you should note that it's saying it puts an onus on the banks to explore all the options before legal action is considered. It does nothing of the sort. Lenders are choosing which options they may or may not offer, and in thousands of cases are offering nothing except voluntary surrender or repossession. There is no onus on them. There are no sanctions under the Central Bank Code of Conduct. I want to give two examples of people with difficulty out of the many cases my office has dealt with over the last 3 years. A family in Drimnagh, a couple in their 30s, 2 young children, had a small business that went under in the economic crash. They're eligible for the mortgage to rent scheme in terms of the value of their house and their level of income. Dublin City Council have confirmed they're eligible for social housing. The lender has refused to put them forward for a mortgage to rent scheme and instead brought before the court seeking repossession. With the assistance of Irish Mortgage Holders Organisation, it was possible to arrange a barrister to represent the family. The barrister, working pro bono, has put it to the judge that a repossession should not be granted when there is a viable alternative which the lender chooses not to operate. There are a whole series of lenders who refused to operate with a mortgage to rent scheme. It's a scheme where only 38 applications have been to a successful conclusion. It is not fit for purpose. The scheme needs to be reformed. It is too cumbersome, takes too long to conclude a deal. It needs much more finance from the Department of Environment, but above all, it needs to be made legally enforceable on lenders where it is a suitable solution. The second case I want to bring to the attention of the government. It's a woman in the area, in Walkinstown. The relationship has ended. Her ex-partner lives outside the state and makes no contribution to the mortgage. She lost her job in the crash and she's paying €900 a month to the Bank of Ireland. €600 of that is paid by the state of mortgage support. You would think someone paying €900 a month could get some sort of an offer from the bank. All she has got is a demand for voluntary surrender and the threat of repossession, and they are bringing her to court shortly. The option of a split mortgage with zero interest or parked amount will give this person a chance of holding on to her home until her situation improved. Again, such an option should be compulsory where it is suitable. Also, for those who decide it is simply too much of a struggle to keep their home and opt for voluntary surrender or letting the bank repossess, there should be a certainty about how residential or residual debt is dealt with. It should be up to the bank to offer some a write-down or write-off and not offer it to others. The commitment to legislation where mortgages are sold to unregulated entities is meaningless when the central bank code has no teeth. We have to move to a situation whereby all lenders or mortgage services operating are subject to a code of conduct on arrears which has real teeth in it. That means legislation to make lenders or mortgage services offer at least the options outlined in this motion before they can move to repossession and bring people to the courts. The motion is very, very specific. It states the existing code of conduct on mortgage arrears, whilst providing comprehensive instructions for creditors dealing with those in arrears, is not fit for purpose and does not provide necessary and important consumer protections. And there is no provision within the code for lenders and mortgage services to be mandated to provide necessary solutions for those in arrears which would prioritise safeguarding the family home. In fact, lenders have the ability to choose which solutions they like and ignore the ones they do not. And that is a fact, Minister. And nobody can say any different. That's the reality for thousands and thousands of families who are facing this distressing situation of possibly losing their homes. And I call on the Minister for Finance to amend the CMA to mandate all creditors and mortgage services operating in the state, including lenders or mortgage services not registered within the state, to offer one of the following solutions to those in mortgage arrears: a split mortgage with no interest payable on the warehoused portion, participation in a reformed mortgage to rent scheme, or certainty for any borrower in negative equity selling or surrendering a property as to how the residual debt will be dealt with prior to the sale or surrender of the property. I've dealt with many, many families, and I'm sure the people who have, or the TDs have as well, who are facing the threat of possibly losing their home. And they're waiting months and months and months and hoping that the banks will deal directly with them. We know that the Irish Mortgage Holders Association have made an agreement with the Allied Irish Bank, which has worked reasonably successfully. They were on the radio all day today, where they were able to look at something like 1,300 deals they made with the bank to enable people to remain in their home. They have further 170 cases with AIB, and they're also dealing with another 150 themselves. And because there's a structure put in place, because the Irish AIB are paying for Irish mortgage holders to actually deliver the service, and that they are able to go in and make a deal directly with the AIB, it is more successful than what has happened in relation to all the other banks. And I'm talking about the major 6 banks, the major 5 banks, other banks, and also other mortgage lenders that were in the market a few years ago and now have sold most of their loans to the banks. And I think it's going to be really, really important that the government grasps this. There's been a revision in 2013. That revision was not robust enough. It wasn't dealing with the actual issue of forcing the banks to offer these 3 options to a mortgage holder before bringing them to the bank. And I've given 2 very, very explicit cases where we're dealing with at the moment. And I'm sure many TDs can come in here and give examples of it as well. And I'm hoping that rather than disregard the private members' bill and the intent behind it, is to make sure that people are not left in limbo dealing with banks who they're very fearful of in the first place, who they're afraid many people to come forward and admit they're in arrears and then deal with it. And that this government should be, I think, really trying to get to grips of what is happening at the moment. And by allowing the banks not to be committed and mandated and legislated to offer these options to mortgage holders, we as a country and you as a government are letting these people down, because it's letting the banks off the hook. It's allowing them to dictate the pace, and it's allowing them to say to a family or a person, no, we're not offering anything else, we're going to repossess your home. And it was no accident that in the case of the woman in Waltonstown, that her house is not now in negative equity. So the banks are moving quite quickly now to move in, to take her home, and then they make money on it, and leaving this woman in a situation where she's not got a roof over her head and where she could absolutely make a provision to keep her home and where she is, with her family, with all the amenities around her that she's got used to over the last number of years. And finally, I want to make a comment on the MARPS process. When it comes to MARP, the banks are really taking the proverbial are really taking the proverbial. MARP was supposed to do two key things: allow people in arrears nominate a third party to help in dealing with the banks, and the second was to get the banks to train dedicated staff to deal with people in huge distress due to mortgage arrears. Instead, we have glorified call centre staffed by young people whose training consists of filling out standard financial statements and little else. There is a conscious policy in all the banks and lenders that those who take the decisions on mortgage arrears under no circumstances come face to face with the real people and the real families who are going to be affected by their hard-nosed decisions. We have noticed that in trying to deal with the banks a number of years ago, and we were able to meet the people that were going to make decisions. Now we can't. It's impossible. All you can contact is a call centre, and these people are not trained properly. And the MARP was supposed to have done that and allowed that situation to develop, and for the banks to invest in training of their staff to be able to deal with people face to face in relation to their mortgages. Third-party nominees increasingly find themselves dealing with their call centres, whereby every time you ring, you talk to a different person. And I think this is unacceptable, Minister, that 3 years on in the process, that the banks still not have trained up their staff to be able to deal or put the right people in place for those that are dealing with the third-party representatives for people, are not dealing directly with them. And it really is leaving people in a very, very vulnerable position. And I don't think it's acceptable. So I really would ask the government to seriously take on board the motion I put forward here. It's been discussed at the Finance Committee. Many people have raised these concerns. I know Irish Mortgage Holders Association have come across these, and many of the banks outside of AIRB they're dealing with. They find it increasingly difficult, and forcing people into the courts where people shouldn't be in the courts if there's solutions there that are viable and the banks have not put it forward for them. So again, I'm asking the Minister to really take on board the private members' bill. It's not been put in for the sake of it. It's not been put in because I think this is just an airy-fairy thing. It's a reality for many, many of the people that have been affected by the mortgage crisis. And I just go back to the very, very beginning. There is a crisis. It hasn't gone away. There's still thousands of families affected by this, and it's an issue that we should be dealing with and raising every so often, every couple of months, to address where we are in relation to the mortgage arrears crisis in this country.
Thank you, Deputy Collins. Our next speaker is Deputy Ruth Coppinger. 6 minutes.